Hi, hello everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of today's podcast. Today we have a fantastic show. We have Fred Penner and Jan Skene from Fred Penner's Place, legendary Canadian classic TV show. So let's start off right off the hop and ask Mr. Penner and Jan, how did Fred Penner's Place come to be? How was it? How did it get created?
That's a good question. I have many answers for that. The the series began or the call came rather in 1985. My first album, The Cat Came Back, came out in 1979-80, and I was working with Raffi's company in Toronto, and producing albums and touring across the country. It was a truly vibrant time for children's entertainment all over North America. And I was apparently building a bit of a reputation at that time. And in 1985, I received a phone call from Dodie Robb, who was the head of children's television then. And they were looking to do a replacement for the Friendly Giant. Ooh. And they thought they had seen me perform at festivals across the country. They liked my energy, and they thought that I might be a person to do that. And I had no anticipation that I would ever do a TV series. Pardon me. So I said, well, what do you want me to do? And Dodie said, what are your druthers? What would you like to do? You know, it's on your plate. And so I did a process that I often do when I'm writing songs is I go specifically for younger audiences. I'll go back to my own childhood, and I'll think of things that were of importance to me, songs that I remembered, feelings that I had, however that unfolded. And I thought back to very positive times that I had with Cubs and Scouts, going on hikes. Marking a trail was the key, where you put twigs on the ground so you could see what direction you were going. So if you got lost, you could just follow that back. And ultimately, I thought a natural environment for a TV series was much more engaging than just a studio where you knock on a door and somebody opens it and come in. I wanted it to have a sense of protection. And I thought, well, how do you protect an environment? And then it was an epiphany, is a hollow log. Let's have a physical and virtual hollow log that the audience would join me on the other side and would meet, many friends, incredible musical guests that I had over the years. And then it expanded into more puppetry along the way. And that's when Dear Jan came on the scene in the early 90s.
That's a great segue. Jan, how did you end up on the show?
Okay, well, interestingly, so I wasn't a puppeteer before I started Fred Penner's Place, and I actually came in, I guess, halfway to almost 2/3 of the way through the run of Fred Penner's Place. And so Fred, I mean, just remind us all, the people before me, kudos to all of them for a fantastic show, but there was another puppet on the show. So I play the puppets of Penelope and Nikki, but there was Giorgio before me, and Wordbird, of course.
Yeah, Giorgio was the actor. The puppeteer was Francie Anderson, and she was just a great, frantic kind of character. And actually, Giorgio and Nikki were not that dissimilar, when I think about it. But Giorgio was sort of a composite, froggish kind of character, but very spontaneous and really a delightful character to play with in the series. And when Jan came on with Nikki, it was the same kind of thing. We could play together and really give Nikki and Penelope subsequently that animistic quality where you really came alive when we were conversing. It wasn't puppet. It was two characters interacting, and it was such fun. I really delighted in that.
Yeah. So the creative team that I came on board with, the director Leslie Leslie Oswald and Nancy Trites-Botkin, who would be the showrunner. I guess she did a lot of the writing as well. They were looking for an actor. They actually came to me and said, do you know anyone in Vancouver who's an actress who could also play, do puppeteering and do voices and sing live on the camera? I said, let me think about that. So I gave her a few names of some people that I had met in theater, because the show was shooting in Vancouver at the time, and I live in Winnipeg and work in Winnipeg. So, meanwhile, I'm thinking, no, why don't they ask me? And, but sure enough, a couple of weeks later, Leslie called me and said, how would you like to audition? So I said, I love to audition. So yeah, she says, just bring a sock, put a little sock on your hand. And, so yeah, I actually made a sock puppet. I was like sewing. I don't do that either, but, I looked at it and I went, okay, this is not going to get cast. So I had the great fortune to work with the most amazing puppeteer of all time and anywhere, Ronnie Burkett. And let me say that again, Ronnie Burkett, I love you. We did a show at Manitoba Theatre for Young People called Seesaw. And I had a crash course in puppeteering on that show. And Leslie had seen that, I guess. And anyway, so I went back to M2IP and I said, I need to borrow Misha, the puppet from Seesaw that Ronnie Burkett designed and made. And because I know it's the puppet that's going to get the job. I mean, I have to give it the voice. I have to give it the soul. I have to give it the love, but it's the face of the puppet that you're seeing. So I borrowed Misha and I sang, I think I sang Raindrops on Roses. That's what I sang. Right. Raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens. And I got the job, and I'll never forget that call. I was actually sitting in a hockey rink in Gimli while my kids were at hockey camp, and Leslie says to me, so we'd like to cast you in this part and with this puppet. And I was like, it literally changed my life from that moment on. Like, I met Fred, I met all the amazing people on the show. We went on to do another show, TP Tales, with Leslie Oswald. Fred and I have done children's theater together. We played Mr. and Mrs. Darling and Peter Pan at M2IP twice. So, I mean, I could go on and on about how it changed my life, but I do that moment. Oh, and then they asked me if I could also play Penelope. So with two completely different puppets. So although my voice is somewhat similar, Nikki was supposed to be the younger, more impulsive child, and Penelope was the very thoughtful, that child that is always thinks of things 6 times sideways before they do anything. And Nikki jumps right in. So, which kind of describes my children perhaps too.
Describes
anyway,
a lot of kids.
I could go on and on, so let me stop there.
Describes my daughter too. My daughter used to love. Okay, my daughter's 12. She's going in 13. And again, it would be very bad of me if I didn't show her the kids shows that I grew up on. So we watched Fred Pender's Place all the time. Every time we would walk out into the woods, she would always look for a log. She said, I want to go to Fred Pender's Place. I'm like, well, that's a TV show, honey. You can't crawl through a log and there's not a gentleman with a guitar on the other side. You can't go over there.
Fred, how did you do that to all that generation of children? Every time they see a log, they're looking on the other side.
I loved it. Magical. I loved the show. I love the show. Now, do you guys have a favorite memory of the show? Do you guys have a specific show that you like that was awesome?
Well, for me, and apologies, Jan, it wasn't a Nikki or Penelope show.
Okay, I'm out of here.
But it was a Mr. Dress Up show.
Oh yeah.
Because Mr. Dress Up came on for a couple of episodes in the I guess about the mid '90s again, and it was a very powerful episode because a couple of 3 weeks prior to him being on, his wife had been tragically killed in a car accident in downtown Toronto. It was the summertime, and the two of them were shopping, and it was a beautiful day, And Ernie's wife said, I'm just going to go outside and, taking the sun and enjoy the day. And Ernie said, yeah, I've got one more thing I want to pick up. I'll meet you outside. And in that time frame, a taxi lost control, jumped the curb, and basically, killed her against the wall. I mean, just the most tragic accident you could possibly imagine. And we, when we heard about that, of course, we reached out immediately with love and condolences, and we said, we're happy to cancel. We're sorry this happened. And he said, no, I want to do it, because he and his wife had talked about it, and we loved each other. Ernie and I had done some things before, and so we said, okay, if that's okay with you, then we will open our doors and our hearts for you. And sure enough, he came to Vancouver, and we had, the scripts were already done, the music was already figured out, and we played. We know how to play. I certainly, playing with Jan was a delight for me, but playing with Ernie was wonderful, because it was very spontaneous. It was so organic. But the reason this episode was so powerful is because the last song that we sang was called "Together Tomorrow." A Tom Chapin tune. Harry Chapin's brother. He was on one of the shows. And so suddenly Ernie and I are sitting in front of the log on the top of the steps, singing this song. And until that moment, we didn't really realize how poignant that song was in relation to what he had just come through. The chorus was, together tomorrow, my friend, tonight when I'm sleeping, I'll dream of us being together tomorrow again. So we're both sitting there, fighting off tears, and we made it through the episode, and then we hugged, and so that was certainly the most intense human experience I've had on television and in my life. Really, it was beautiful.
Thank you very much for sharing that. That was a very beautiful story.
Wow,
it really was. Wow.
Excuse me.
Dan, do you have a favorite show that you did of Fred?
I'm gonna have to lighten things up here, I think. But oh my God, Mr. Dress Up and The Friendly Giant, those were my shows. That was what I grew up on, right? So yeah, I mean, honestly, every show I did with Fred with Nikki was my favorite show, because she was just so fun, and she was so light. It didn't hurt my arm quite as much as Penelope was a much bigger puppet. I don't know if you can see, there's a picture on my wall back there of us. I can send that to you if you want, but it's Penelope was quite a large puppet, and Nikki was just a little sock puppet. So lots more flexibility with the voice and the articulation of it. But it was just the fun that we had together, and we had scripts, of course. And it was the hardest job ever. Like, you go to work every day, and I mean, oh my gosh, sorry, I'm not answering your question. I'll come back to that.
Okay.
But we go to work every day. And I mean, Fred, you did this for years, but this was new to me. And you go, you do some blocking, you go straight into the music rehearsal, you learn all the songs. I mean, you've learned them, but you do them with the band. And then I get shoved in a stump somewhere with my arms shoved over, stuck up. And I have usually one or two assistants with me. I had Peter Harrison and Sean Kettner working the arms, and most uncomfortable, horrific, working conditions ever. Really, I should have complained. No, I'm just kidding. but that's what puppeteering is, right? So, so anyway, it was just such a, but so gratifying in the end. And I think that's where I'm going with this, with how hard the work was. And then you got to do the show. And then those moments on set when we're actually connecting with each other and singing with each other and getting through. And I got to sing with Fred Penner like every day, and it was just, it was such a wonderful experience all around.
Yeah.
My very first day on set, I do remember, because we were in Vancouver and everybody was still figuring out this new dynamic, right, Fred? I mean, you had new directors, new writers, new, almost like a new Bible for the show and all that. So I remember them telling, the scene was Fred was walking across the forest floor, and there was a swing or something, and they wanted Nikki to walk across the forest floor with Fred. And I'm like, well, how do you propose we do this? Fred is 6'2" and Nikki is 8 inches tall. So they go, well, because they hadn't really at that point designed the set to accommodate these kinds of puppets, right? And so they put me on the floor. They said, well, you lay on the floor and we're going to cover you with leaves. You stick your, do you remember this, Fred? This was,
No, it's vague. Keep
these
going.
were the learning moments, right? So then I have Nikki on my arm, and meanwhile I'm so new to it too. I'm like, is this how this is done? And so then Nikki's supposed, and then so I'm laying there, they got it all set up. Somehow I'm managing to see a monitor, because that's also part of it. I got to see a monitor.
Yeah.
I don't know where to look or whatever. And then once we're all set up and I'm completely buried in leaves, and then I kind of, between the leaves blowing out of my mouth, I'm like, so how do you propose this puppet walks? Is someone going to drag my lifeless body across?
Did you manage?
Uh,
You managed to get the shot though, right?
You know what? We got a static shot on the ground, and then I had to go and sit in the swing with Fred. And Fred, you must remember that. I put Nikki on your shoulder and I hid behind you, and we swung
Oh, yeah. Okay. I remember
swung
that.
back
Yeah.
and forth on the swing. And it was the cutest, most like darling little thing. I don't even know if I had
Yeah.
hand assistance at that point. And I mean, I would love to see that episode again, because it's probably horrific, because, you know, we weren't quite set up for puppets. But it was really, again, that from that time on, I realized part of my job was also was saying, okay, this is where a puppet can sit, or this is where the puppet will be
Yeah.
the most efficiently used in terms of being able to interact with Fred, because
Yeah.
you know, it was a learning experience for all of us from that point onwards. And then we got quite good at it. The show did move back to Winnipeg eventually, and
Yeah.
we were in a few different setups of studios. And so once we came back, they really worked hard on designing the set so that it could accommodate the puppets and Fred
Yeah.
into better playing spaces.
Yes, exactly.
Now, do you guys think? I guess it's gonna get a little deep here. I guess.
Oh
Do
dear.
you think a show like Fred Penner's Place, like it was back then, do you think it would work now in 2022?
I have no doubt that it would. I actually get quite angry sometimes, if I ever get angry, that the way that the industry goes, and I had battles with people along the way of the concern about hits for the viewing audience. Like you've got to catch them every 15 seconds. There has to be a change, a different color, a different, static, some kind of movement needs to happen in order to gain the to maintain a momentum, perhaps, but to engage the audience. And my perspective right from the get-go was, if you do this with integrity, if you look at that camera as if it's one child, and this is something that happened, often in the course of the series, where there's so much, as Jan was saying, there's so much information that I'm trying to assimilate. What's the next chord? What's the next lyric? Where's the cue card going to be? Where, all of that stuff. It's a major bit of pressure on the brain to try and keep it all in order. And sometimes I would just sort of zone out a bit. My focus would be gone, and the floor director, Barb, I think Barb, yeah, the floor director would get a message from Leslie up in the booth. The floor director would come to me, would look me right in the eye and say, one child. And that would be my grounding. And then I would look at the camera as if it was just one child, not the mere to thousands of children, but one child. So that level of intimacy, of care for who they are, asking rhetorical questions, but expecting answers. So it was a dialogue that was happening, which was getting into the child, and that kind of thing, that level of intimacy is universal, is constant. I don't think you ever lose that bringing respect and concern and real love to the camera doesn't get old, I don't think.
Well, let's just say,
know.
that was a great answer. Well, that's a really good answer, because that one child was me.
Yeah, exactly.
You spoke right to me. Like, I'm talking to you right now, and you're talking to me, and it's almost like it's exactly the same thing as it was on the show, right? Like, when Nikki or when Penelope would talk, like, I would be paying attention, because you're talking right to me.
Yeah.
Mhm,
And that's why I do this podcast, is because it's people like you too. And with people with today's special, it's right there above me, and Pokeroo and Mr. Dress Up right there. It's those shows that did exactly what you said. Talk directly to the child, not pandering to the child, not talking down to the child, but talking to the child. That ingrained the shows directly in there. Like, I'll never forget Fred Penner's place, ever.
I mean, I'll go a little further than Fred to say that not only do I think would a show be successful like Fred Penner's place, but it's necessary. I mean, I have two granddaughters now. Fred has a few grandchildren as well, and I watch what they're watching, and it's not there. The content isn't there. It's all frenetic. It's all, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff out. It's teaching, but it's very measured. It's very, and kids get so much choice now to what they're watching.
Yeah.
Whereas, like I said, when I was growing up, I had Mr. Dress Up, The Friendly Giant, Shay Ellen. Those were my three shows, maybe Romper Room, and that was it. You didn't get many more choices. So it's really hard. I mean, what Fred brought to the show is exactly what he said. It's absolute integrity, absolute love, absolute care for the children, for the viewing audience. And, Kevin, that's what and it was demanded of the whole show as well. So, I remember times where they'd want to shoot something out of order and it was like, no. This goes we shoot in chronological order.
Wow. You shot the show in chronological order?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was Fred, you fought for that a lot. You wanted it in real time. This was the morning that Fred came out of the log. This is what happened to him. It was like, and, but and I mean, I'm happy that you have me on the show.
Because it wasn't shot that way. I mean, when Nancy came on board, and the scripts became much more theoretical in a way. Not theoretical, theatrical.
Theatrical. Okay,
yeah. Where because the earlier shows were very spontaneous. I'd be given an outline. And Fred goes from here. He greets the audience, not specifically what I would say, but it was just a series of points. And you get to this corner of the table at the end of this song. So it was very much on me to make up my own dialogue. But as we got into more sophisticated shows, when Jan came on board, the shows then could have been done out of sequence, and I think there were a couple that we did that because setups were more complicated. So there was maybe a need to do that. But I liked the feel, the continuity of going through a show, and then you could, I think it maybe gave a little more sense of real completion and understanding for the viewing audience. Maybe.
And it's a real person doing real things.
Yeah,
That's the other thing. Oh, that's what I was going to say. I'm really happy, that you brought me on the show and I'm the puppeteer, but also every show, or not almost every show, had a human guest on it, a very talented human guest who brought their talent to the world, to the little children, and showed them what they could do. Like there's Tracy Doll singing opera. They never pandered, never talked down to children. It was like, hey, look here's Ray Saint Germain playing the guitar. Like, there's those are only a couple of examples, but there's so many that I think that was also just the fact that it's real people doing real things, and showing little kids that these are the kinds of things that you can do, and that was important to me.
As a child watching the show, I knew that especially with this one, I knew that the people on the show were just actors playing parts, right? I knew that, but I knew with Fred Penner's Place it was Fred Penner. Period. Because I know, like with my research that I did for the show, I know you aren't Fred Penner playing Fred Penner. You were Fred Penner.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't, and that was really important to me, that I didn't put on some character. Basically the old "what you see is what you get" kind of thing. The integrity that I hope that I brought to the show, started very early in my life. I had a sister who was born with Down syndrome, and she taught me the value of music, in her spirit. And then over the years, I was involved in, many organizations that work with special needs children. So I didn't want to be an artificial thing. I didn't have to put on a strange kind of costume that was going to change me into Fred Penner. I wanted it to be as organic, as positive, as human to human a relationship as I could possibly muster, so that those children would understand that I was going to say spiritual, that sensitive kind of connection that we all long for and need in our interaction with children, especially. The kids are such sponges. They learn by observing and imitating, and if you don't give them the love and concern that they need, then you're doing a disservice, basically.
Totally understand that. I totally get that. Now,
he did put on those vests though, and those sweatsuits. Come on, Fred. Those were straight out of your closet, right?
I was going to ask, were your costumes
pretty much
your own clothes, or did CBC provide those?
No, I had them made for me for the most part.
He sold them by hand on the way to set.
That's right.
He did.
in the midst of writing the next song. And for your listeners, in the not too distant future, I'm going to be setting up possibly a Facebook marketplace and auctioning off the old costumes for charitable direction. Yeah.
Oh, you just let me know. I'll advertise that like you wouldn't believe.
Oh, brilliant. That's great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll do me one favor though. I'll advertise you. You advertise this show.
There we go.
All right.
Perfect.
Now, speaking of costumes and things like that, do you guys have anything from that show left other than the costumes? Like, do you have Penelope? Do you have Nikki?
You're gonna make me cry now.
You make me cry.
Oh yeah. Here we go.
No,
I
don't have. Yeah, there's something you can advertise. I mean, we lost both of the, as you may know, the show shut down quite quickly. That's been, Fred's talked a lot about that in various interviews, and it just stopped. Like one day we're working in the morning, and the afternoon we're all going home, and it was shocking
Wow.
and sad. And I mean, for me, who I'd only been there for 4 years, but I mean, I felt for Fred, I don't even know what you went through, Fred. That was a terrible, terrible day and time. And anyway, we certainly, because I don't think we kind of really knew what was going to happen in going forward. So I never asked where are the puppets, or can I, take care of the puppets. And we all of a sudden, I mean, everything was gone, right? Fred, you kind of went on a search for some of that stuff, didn't you?
I did. It was very difficult day, because I had there was no warning that this was going to happen. I'd been writing songs on the way to the studio for the morning show, and I got there. I'm doing the usual process, as Jan said, getting the music, doing some blocking, and then I forget who came in and told me, but said that the show's been canceled, and it was, oh, okay. Well, I'm pretty good at rolling with the punches. And so I thought, oh, well, okay, I guess we'll finish off the day and that'll be that. And so after the morning, I'm having my lunch. I'm working on the songs for the afternoon shows. And somebody, Leslie maybe, comes in and says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm just prepping for the afternoon." "Well, no, it's done. It's done." And I was in shock, absolutely. And then everything sort of imploded. The set was destroyed. Some pieces were salvaged and taken to a tree farm outside of Winnipeg. But I saw those pieces once, but I could not retrieve them, years later. And the only things left that I was able to hold on to is the backpack, is Wordbird, my guitar case, my own stuff, and a couple of little pieces. But it really, it was and is unfortunate that at least enough of that, the remnants of that were not revered enough to be held on to.
That's
Yeah, I don't want to get started on that, because I might start saying some nasty
No.
things that I don't want to put
Yeah.
on here.
Well, that could be
There's a
for
few.
another show later on. You can come back.
Yeah, we-
Yeah.
The other side.
I did hear that, I think it was on Facebook or somewhere, I read that Penelope is being used at a school in Winnipeg. And I don't know where I got that from. Fred, did you see that somewhere?
Oh,
Someone
boy.
sent it to me, I know, probably a few years
Yes,
ago now.
vaguely,
And
yeah.
I really, in my gut, I wanted to call them and say, can I bring you a different puppet and I can have that one? And, Fred, give it to Fred or keep it or whatever. And I just couldn't do it. They were talking about
No.
how wonderful the puppet was and how amazing the kids responded to this puppet in
Yeah.
the school. And I was like, Penelope, you're doing your job. I don't want to
Yeah.
ruin that. So there's a different, and like Fred and I were just talking actually about cleaning our houses and what we have to get rid of as we move on in various career paths. And it's like, really what, it's lovely to have those things. And I mean, certainly with the show, I think that this stuff should have been kept. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
It is
Totally agree
iconic.
with
It
you.
is part of our history. It is part of the Canadian television history.
Yeah.
And it's I just don't really, for Fred, I don't understand
No,
what
no,
happened.
I don't know. I think it was personal. I think the person who was taking over for children's television took a dislike to me for whatever reason, and wanted, and also in the late 90s, that's when computer generated animation was high, which is much less costly than having to pay a human.
Probably an expensive show. It was an expensive show, I bet. Eh?
Yeah, I think it probably was. It was a big cast and residuals and all that, but it was not a pleasant ending, to say the least. But talking about pieces, I was contacted by the Natural History Museum in Ottawa a number of years ago, and they wanted to do a children's television retrospective for the National Museum in History in Ottawa. And so they now have the Wordbird that they are refurbishing, making him look or her look good again, and they've got the backpack, and they've got some of whatever items I had, plus a couple of sweatshirts, and they're going to do a presentation there, which will, I think, be coming up in a couple of months and run for about a year.
I need to go
which
there.
is, yeah.
I need to
So,
go.
I would love to find Nikki. If anybody knows where Nikki is, please return my child. Return my inner child. I'm losing it.
It's been one final question, and then we're going to end it because we're getting low of time here. Would you do the show again? If someone were to come up to you and say, let's do a reunion show of Fred Penner's Place, like, would you
in a
crawl
blink
the log again?
Well, probably not. The crawling through the log might be difficult now. Well, no, the crawling would
build it up high. You just have to walk through it. Movie magic.
The crawling through might happen, but it's getting back on my feet, which would be a little more challenging as my knees are more compromised as a septuagenarian. No, I would still be doing the series probably now if it hadn't been pulled off the air. I received so much positive feedback for what the show did and continues to do, and I'm very frustrated with CBC that they don't, because it never received any reruns.
No.
It was on their gem station for a while, but those episodes were pulled off. So the respect and integrity that I would have liked to have seen continue is not there. People are moving on, and no sour grapes. But I believe the series still has relevance in today's, going back to that question, in today's society. I think kids, especially now, because it is so disconnected and so frantic and so other, whatever that is now, I would still be doing it because I believed in the quality of the show. I believed in the integrity of the show, and everybody who came into it, bar none, felt the same thing. They all felt that they were doing something of value for the Canadian children, for the North American children.
Well, I'm trying to think of a word. I'm trying to end the show, and I'm trying to think of a word that I could use to end the show. Oh, wait.
Oh,
hold on. Look at this. Wordbird couldn't be here today, so this is his cousin, right? This is Wordbird's cousin here. So I wanted to say thank you. I wanted to say thank you.
THANKY.
Oh.
You.
I wanted to say thank you, Fred.
Oh, that's cute, Kevin. That's very cute.
Jan.
You're very welcome.
Much. It's delighted for the both of you to share your memories. Fred Penner's Place represented a lot of connection, kindness, teaching, learning, and honesty.
Mm-hmm.
and it will literally go down in Canadian television history. So I appreciate the work that both of you, and plus all the others that helped make the show, went into doing, and it will forever be a memory in my head, in Ashley's head, in millions of people all over North America.
Well, I just that's so sweet of you, Kevin. I really deeply appreciate that, and I do encourage all your viewers, all your listeners, to send a letter to CBC Kids and say, put someone, because they've got almost 1,000 episodes that they could put on the air if they had a mind to. So that's my encouragement is write a letter.
Look at this. Look at my cup. Can you read it, or is it backwards?
No, we can read it. World needs more Canada. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you guys very much for being on the show.
Thanks, Kevin.
Wonderful.
Great pleasure.
Wonderful guys.
Thanks, Jan.
Thanks, Fred. Great
we're
seeing
gonna
you
say
again.
We're gonna say
Fabulous
goodbye and see you next time on
Okay.
today's podcast.
Thanks so much.
Take good care of each other. Take good care of each other.
Take
good care of each other.
Thank you.